Good morning, and welcome to the Salem Lutheran Church Sunday morning Bible study. We'll be getting started in just a few moments. If you'd like to join in on the discussion, please join us by going to slcw.org and clicking the link to join the group. We'll be starting in just a few moments.
Well, good morning, and welcome to our Bible study here at Salem Lutheran Church. Today we are going to be discussing Psalm 143. And to start with, I always remember when I was in the seminary, one of my professors always talked about, this was a professor I had in something called exegesis. Exegesis is looking at a section of scripture and trying to understand, taking from it what it is trying to say to us. And he always emphasized the importance of context. And that means understanding what was going on when these words were written. What happened before, what happened after, what was the whole context for what was being said. Because he said, if you don't understand the context, if you don't understand what's going on or why these words were written by this particular writer, you probably are going to miss the meaning of the whole passage. And that was always something that I remembered when I was writing my sermons. Always try to help the people understand not just the passage, because if you just look at passages, you can misunderstand what they're really talking about unless you understand the context. Who wrote it, when it was written, why it was written, what was going on when these words were written. So you have to understand all of that. And I've always tried to bring some of that to our study now of the book of Psalms. And I think that's important here with Psalm 143. Which is the one we're looking at. I'm going to just read the opening from my commentary. It says, the title of this psalm is simply a Psalm of David. It is another cry to God from a time of crisis and affliction because of David's many enemies. It is numbered among the 7 penitential psalms, songs of confession and humility before God. So the important first question we ask ourselves is, all right, David wrote this. Seems to be during a time of crisis. What was the crisis? Well, most authorities think it was written during one of 2 times of crisis. Either A, it was written during the time when David was trying to hide from King Saul. And we talked about this over the last couple Psalms, about how these Psalms were written by David when he was hiding out in caves, trying to escape the enemies who were plotting against him, hiding out against Saul, who was trying to kill him because they saw him as a threat to Saul's reign as king. And so because David had become very popular among the people, he seemed to be in position to assume the role of king. And so Saul was threatened by David. And so David had to leave the capital city, run for his life, and go into hiding. And at one point in his life, we find him in a cave. And that was last Psalm. Some think this psalm is the same, that it was written during that time of David's life when he was hiding out from his enemies who were seeking him to kill him. I'm not one of those who think that. I think this psalm was written later on in David's life. I think it was written during a really bad time in David's personal life, personal and professional life. What do I mean by that? I think my collar was sticking up here. I'm going to pull that down. Okay. Feel better now. Yeah. Thanks, Tim, for doing the same. Anyways, I think it was written later on after David had become king. And one of the things we noticed about David's lifetime when he was king was that he had a lot of problems in his family. He had married several different women, had made them queens, and he had children from different wives. And in fact, there was the one son who always seemed to cause a problem for him was the eldest of his sons. It was the son of his first wife, Michal, or Michelle. And Michael's son, Absalom, always seemed to cause problems for him. He was the crown prince. He was the one destined to be the next king. And yet he always seemed to be getting into trouble. In fact, there's one story where one of his other sons raped his stepsister. And Absalom was so infuriated with this that he went out and killed the stepbrother. And that caused all kinds of problems within the royal family and within the nation. But the biggest problem Absalom caused is that he really was kind of greedy for the throne. He wanted to become king long before, and he wasn't willing to wait for his father to die. And so the story is told about how one day he raised an army of his own and went out to do battle. He created a civil war in Israel. And if he had been victorious, he would have taken over. He would have killed his father and probably taken over the throne. And so the story is told to us about how David had to raise his own army and go and do battle against his own son. And there were several psalms that were written during this time. And in fact, it was one of the more famous psalms that we use a lot of times at funerals is the one that starts out, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord. We believe that psalm was written during that same period of time when Absalom was threatening his father with an army. Now, if you want to know how the story ends, David and Absalom's armies actually do battle. David is victorious, defeats his son. And of course, there's this wonderful scene in the Old Testament where David is waiting to hear news on his son. He, in spite of what his son had done, he wanted to welcome his son back into the royal household. Well, one of his commanding generals knew that wasn't the best thing because Absalom would continue to cause problems, might continue to raise armies and do battle, and this would be a continuing, ongoing thing. And so the general decided he would save David the tragedy of having to do something to his own son. And so when they captured his son after the battle, this general executes his son. The story is told about how as Absalom is fleeing from the battlefield, as he has his chariot riding underneath a tree, his hair gets caught up in this limbs of a tree, and he's left hanging from this tree. And that's how the general finds him. Instead of helping him and cutting him down, he takes out one of his spears and kills Absalom. And so the word comes back to David that Absalom has been killed in the battle. And David is just unbelievably grief-stricken. Well, we think this psalm comes from that period of time when David was either doing battle against his son or when he had gotten the word that his own son had been killed in the battle. So if you use that context, I think it helps you understand the grief that David was experiencing, the feelings of especially on a Father's Day. I just thought of that. On a Father's Day, no matter what our sons do, they're still our sons. And no matter what kind of pain they cause us, they're still our sons. And David must have felt the same way. I hear my Alexa's talking to me. That's why I stopped. I don't know what triggered it, but it's giving me a message of some kind. Anyways, so on a Father's Day, you can imagine just the grief of a father learning about the death of his own son. No matter what I think our sons do to us, no matter what happens between fathers and sons, and there always seems to be this kind of rivalry between fathers and sons, they're still our sons, and we still love them no matter what. And David was no exception. He loved Absalom in spite of everything. And so when the word comes to him that his own son has been killed in this terrible, terrible battle, he's just moved to an unbelievable amount of grief. So if you understand that context, if you understand that pain that David is feeling, then you'll understand, I think, the psalm a little bit better. Because as always, whenever David was experiencing problems in his life, he always turned to God. And so the psalm starts out. So if you follow along with me, Psalm 143, it starts out by David calling out to God. And it says, hear my prayer, O Lord. Hear my prayer, O Lord. And again, the word Lord there is from the Hebrew word Yahweh. And every time the word Yahweh is invoked for Lord, because remember, there's a couple different words for God in the Old Testament. Most commonly, there are the two most common ones. Oh, I just dropped my clipboard. Two most common ones are Adonai. Well, actually, there's Adonai, which means Lord. There's Elohim, which means God. but then the other one is Yahweh. And Yahweh always refers to the covenant God. It takes us back to the time when Moses was at that burning bush, and God is commanding him to go down to Egypt to get his people free from the Pharaoh. And when finally at the end, when Moses says, well, when I get there, who shall I say has sent me? And he says, tell them Yahweh has sent you. Yahweh always refers us to the covenant God, the God who made the promise to Moses that he would be with him as he went down to Egypt. And when Moses brings the people back to that same mountain after they leave Egypt, it's that same Yahweh who makes the covenant with the people, basically saying, I will be your God, you will be my people. So Yahweh is always the covenant God who promised that he would be with his people no matter what the future brought. And so here we hear David once again going to this covenant God, to Yahweh, not to Adonai, not to Elohim, but to Yahweh, imploring God who made the promise that he would be with him always. And so he says, hear my prayer, Yahweh. You promised you would. You said you'd always be with me, that you'd comfort me and strengthen me and answer me. So hear my prayer, Yahweh. Give ear to my supplications. This is a very common literary tool by Hebrew writers. When they basically, it's called parallelism, where they say the same thing twice. And that's where you hear the same thing. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my supplication. It's a way of drawing an emphasis on this. I really want you to listen to me. I really want you to hear me. I want you to hear what I'm saying. Give ear to my supplications, O Lord. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my supplications. In your faithfulness, answer me. And in your righteousness, do not enter into judgment with your servant, for in your sight no one is righteous. So we hear David saying, look, I'm calling on you, not because I deserve it, not because I have earned your respect or your love, not because I've done anything to warrant you listening to my prayer at this moment, but only because you are the righteous God. You are the God who promised to listen to us. So it's not because of me that you should listen. It's because of who you are. And so we hear David defining God as a God who is gracious and loving and merciful and has promised to walk with his people in each and every moment of life. So he says, hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my supplications. In your faithfulness, answer me. And in your righteousness, not my righteousness, not because I'm so good, but because you are so good. Do not enter into judgment with your servant, for in your sight no one living is righteous. So he's saying, I don't deserve for you to listen to me, but you listen to me because that is who you are. I have done nothing to earn your right to listen to me, but you are a God of love and graciousness. You promised that you would listen. So listen to me because of who and what you are. And then he goes on. And so he talks a little bit about what is the nature of his crisis. For the enemy has persecuted my soul. And you hear him talking here about Absalom, my enemy. His own son has become his enemy. For the enemy has persecuted my soul. He has crushed my life to the ground. He has made me dwell in darkness like those who have long been dead. And therefore my spirit is overwhelmed within me. My heart within me is distressed. You hear how crushed David is. Hear the father talking about a son who has turned on him. For the enemy has persecuted my soul. He's not just coming after my life. He has turned on me, his father. He has crushed my life to the ground. He has made me dwell in darkness. By the way, the word darkness there is better translated as Sheol. And what was Sheol? Sheol was the place of the dead. In the Jewish theology or Jewish reasoning, Sheol was the place where people went after they died. It was kind of like a holding cell. So after you died, you went to Sheol. And if you remember in the story of Jesus, when after his death, it says he descends into hell. Well, he didn't descend to hell. That's a bad translation. He descends not into hell, but into Sheol, the place of the dead. For what reason? To free the souls who are in this place, to free them, to allow them to rise up and to join God in the eternal dwellings of heaven. And so David is saying, I have been so struck down by this terrible thing that has happened to me that I feel like I'm down in Sheol. Darkness, the darkness of Sheol, the darkness of death has surrounded me. For the enemy has persecuted my soul. He has crushed my life to the ground. He has made me dwell in Sheol, in darkness, like those who have long been dead. And therefore my spirit is overwhelmed within me. My heart within me is distressed. You can just hear the devastation of David here. I mean, he is so devastated by what's going on. And he's in a no-win situation. Because if he does battle with his son and wins, he knows it's probably going to mean the death of his own son. He's hoping it won't, but he knows it probably will. So does he want that? No. But on the other hand, if he loses the battle to his son, that means he'll be dead. He'll be killed himself. His son's the only way his son can take the throne is by killing his father. And so here he's caught between two things, his death or his son's death. A father and a son caught in this struggle between life and death. You can just hear there's no good outcome for David. No matter what tomorrow brings, no matter what the future brings, it's bad. It's going to devastate him. And so you hear that pain in David's soul. And I've always thought for all of us, there have probably been points in our life when we have felt those same kinds of devastation, when there is no good choice, no matter what we choose to do, no matter what the future holds, it's bad. There is no good coming out of this. And I can't imagine what those times would have been for you, but I imagine as I'm talking, you're thinking about those situations in your life. Times in your life when no matter what happened the next day, it was going to be something bad. No matter what happened, it was going to be something terrible. And I sort of, as I said that, I thought about when my own wife passed away, because I didn't know what I wanted. I mean, if she lived, that meant she would still be trapped in that body, wrecked with multiple sclerosis, still blind, still confined to a wheelchair, not being able to really do much or enjoy life. On the other hand, so I didn't want to lose her, but I didn't want her in that. So what should I pray for? Should I pray for her to be released from all this pain she was experiencing? But then I'd lose my wife. Or should I want her trapped in that body that was destroying her psychologically? What should we wish for? David was caught in that same kind of bind. What would he wish for? His death or his own son's death? There was no good outcome for David. And so you hear that kind of pain and the sense of that I'm down in Sheol, I'm down in darkness, I'm down in this deep, dark, depressing place, and my heart is overwhelmed because of it. There is nothing that I can do that's going to be good. So what should I do? So he does what he always does. He turns to God. He turns to his God in prayer and asks for God to provide him the help that he needs, the answer. Tell me what to do, God. Tell me what I should do. And then he goes on to talk about something else. Let's go to verse 5. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all your works. I muse on the work of your hands. I spread out my hands to you. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land. Selah. You always hear David yearning for a time when he was younger, when he said, there was a time in my life when things were so much simpler. I remember when I was just that little shepherd boy on my dad's farm down in Bethlehem with Jesse. And I remember things were so much simple then. My life was very easy. I got up in the morning, I had breakfast, I went out and I tended the sheep. It was a pretty simple life for me. And I really lived a wonderful childhood. I long for those days again before I became king, before I was faced with these impossible decisions. I remember the days of old. How many of us, as we've gotten older, do the same thing? We sit back and think when we were younger, when life was so much simpler for us then. Everything was so clear, and the future was like a bright rainbow lying out in front of us where we thought everything was going to be just wonderful. And life was just a pot of gold waiting for us to grab a hold of it. I remember growing up, and I think back now that as I told somebody the other day, I just finished celebrating my 42nd anniversary of my 39th birthday. I'm now 81, and I find myself a lot of times thinking back to when things were so much simpler for me, when I was just a little boy going to school, having my friends, going off to college. I loved my time in college. It was great adventure. And now I'm 81, and life is kind of in its final stages. And I think back to all those golden days, and did I realize everything that I was hoping for when I was a kid? And we hear David kind of yearning for that, yearning and saying, I wish I was back just that little boy out in the fields with those sheep. Life was so simple then. The answers were so clear to me then. And now here I am caught up in this mess with my son, having to go off and do battle. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all your works. I muse on the work of your hands. I spread out my hands to you. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land. He longs for those simpler days of youth. And then he says at the end, Selah. Selah is always a mark in a psalm where it says where the reader is supposed to just stop and pause and think and meditate upon that. So we stop and we think about it, and we yearn for those simpler days, just like David did. Yearn for those simpler days. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all your works. I muse on the work of your hands. I spread out my hands to you. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land. Life was so simple then, and the issues were so simple, and decisions were so simple. And now here I sit in a camp by the firelight, thinking about the battle that's going to happen the next day, thinking about either is it the end of my life or the end of my son's life. Boy, I just wish I was that little boy still out in the fields taking care of sheep. Life was so simple. Life was so easy back then. Looking at my notes. The interesting thing I think in this particular section that I find is David saying, when we face these kind of bad times in our life, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to drive us closer to God or further from God. Either when we face those bad moments in our life, we're going to find ourselves drawing ourselves closer to God, looking for help and strength and support. Or we're going to raise an angry fist to God, curse God, and walk away. And David is saying, I'm trying so hard to hang on. I'm trying so hard. I long for you. I'm trying to hang on, but it's so hard, God, in the midst of this crisis to hang on to my faith. And again, I think any one of us who have faced devastating moments in our life have had that same kind of crisis of faith. Hold on to our faith or to walk away from it. I guess the fact that we're all here today means that when we face those moments in our life, we were able to hang on. Hang on in spite of what was going on around us. Hang on in spite of it. In spite of asking the question, where is the merciful God in the midst of all this pain I'm experiencing? Somehow we found the way to work through that and to hold on to our faith. Just like David is holding on with his fingertips to that faith and that belief in God. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land. I'm trying to hang on, God. I'm trying to hold on. Help me. Help me in the midst of this. And I guess that's a prayer we all should be uttering from time to time. When you face moments like that, cling to God. Turn to God. He has not deserted you. He has not left you. He will abide with you now and forever. that seems like a good place to stop in this psalm. So I'm going to stop for now, and we'll pick it up. Hope that this whole psalm study didn't sound too depressing to you. But the psalm is what the psalm is. It's talking about real life. So anyways, we'll stop here, and I'm going to turn to Tim and say, hey, Tim, what's going on at Salem this week?
Well, thank you, Pastor. Going on at Salem is a lot of stuff. And we should realize that we have worship coming up at 10 a.m. Worship at 10 a.m. this morning. And that is in our sanctuary. We're not outside at the pavilion as of yet. So join us there in the sanctuary. We also like to invite you to what happens right after our sanctuary service, which is our fellowship. And you can join us for that. Now, we have a special gift for the fathers that appear today. Pastor Nathan was gracious enough to buy some gifts for dads, and we'll hand those out following worship, and we can all, put them in action during fellowship. You got to put them on your keys, I guess. Let's get the key.
No thanks are necessary.
Okay. Well,
thanks are necessary.
Thank you very much, Pastor. Come on, Barb. Barb, he's asking for thanks.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
I'm not. I'm too humble for that.
Too humble for that. Okay. Alrighty. So, at this point, the rest of our week goes Monday night NFL. We have our meal at 6 o'clock on NFL Monday night. That stands for Nourishment, Fellowship, and Learning. The Nourishment and Fellowship happens at 6 until 7, and then we watch an episode of The Chosen. Now, this week starts our process of preparing for Season 6 to be released in November. So we're going to start watching Season 3, Episode 1, and that, once we get through the end of Season 5, Episode 8, will line us up right on time to see the next episode of The Chosen once it's released, Season 6. So join us on Monday nights at 7 p.m. to watch the episodes that we watch. We have a nice discussion following them, and we'd love to have you join us. On Friday, we continue on our C2C, which is cover-to-cover Bible study support group, which is Friday, 7 o'clock. We join each other in prayer, in hearing God's word, in sharing God's grace, and in serving God's children, all here on Friday night on Zoom. And you're welcome to join us. You don't have to be at a certain point in the Bible to join us. We have reading plans that you could start today if you wanted to, because what we're hoping to do is to complete a Bible in a year. And if you join us now, well, your year will end next year at this time. No big deal. So the idea is join us, have a great time connecting with people and getting the support you need to continue on this goal, because this isn't an easy task. It needs to have a community help us make it through. Now, one of the main things that we've seen is that we all seem to catch up our reading on the Thursday or Friday of the session. And you know what? That ain't a bad thing, but we want to get to the point of opening up our books every single day, at least 4 times a week, so that we can be gaining the benefits of reading the Bible 4 or more times a week. So it's one of the objectives. We want to gain the benefits of doing this reading, and we also want to read the whole entire Bible from cover to cover. We go and do prayers. We have conversations about what's been going on in the passages that we've read. We pray. We do a quiz time, 10 questions each week that we make. It makes us dive deep into the Bible, into different passages and in different books. And we also plan ahead for giving and serving God's children as we try to make this an annual thing, an overall annual thing, so that we can benefit the community as we go. So join us on Friday for that Bible study, and we hope that you join us again next Sunday at 9 a.m. for Pastor Nathan's Psalm Bible study. Now, I'm guessing, are we moving on, or are we done with Psalm 143?
No, we're only halfway through it.
Halfway through it. So we will continue Psalm 143, Part 2, next Sunday. I guess that's all I have to say. What do you have to say, Pastor?
Well, I just want to say happy Father's Day to all our fathers who are listening. May this day be wonderful. May you have a wonderful time with your children. And until next Sunday, when we meet again, God's blessings be with you, and may he give you a week filled with love and joy. Until next Sunday, God's blessings be with you.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you very much, Pastor.